they're not considering is the possibility we're looking at a technology transfer, that the survivors of a lost civilization who already had all that knowledge came to Gobekli Tepe and used that site as a center of initiation to teach the local hunter-gatherers how to do agriculture.
I don't understand why this is controversial.
This is a game changer. This information, it changes everything. It changes the way we've looked at our past, it changes the whole story of archaeology, and it changes the way we're going to look at the future. And a sophisticated site with astronomical alignments, with hundreds and hundreds of megalithic pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, the world's first perfectly aligned north-south building.
I don't understand why this is controversial. I really don't. I mean, I do. I understand it because I know that once people start teaching things and once people start doing lectures and giving speeches, they want to stick to their guns, and they want to somehow or another avoid anything that's going to contradict what they've been espousing.
This is a game changer. This information, it changes everything. It changes the way we've looked at our past, it changes the whole story of archaeology, and it changes the way we're going to look at the future. And I think that people in academia are reluctant to embrace that change, and they're afraid of being called pseudoscientists, because there's a whole lobby of skeptics who use this word pseudoscientist or pseudo-archaeologist as an instant dismissal of other ideas. And those who are in the profession, they don't want to get tarred with that brush. They want to keep themselves clean and pure.
I understand that, but you're talking about hard evidence.
Yeah.
You're talking about this nuclear glass. You're talking about nanodiamonds. You're talking about core samples that show this massive shift when you do the ice core samples, massive shift in temperature. And you're talking about very clear evidence of impacts that we know exist. It's not like a comet's a theory. No. It's not like it's Bigfoot or something. Like we're looking for the final piece of evidence that shows that a comet is a real thing.
Exactly,
it's real.
It's totally real, but it's so difficult for those who are invested in other models to accept. And unfortunately, they have the ear of the media. By the way, all the scientists in the Comet Research Group are absolutely mainstream scientists, and they have taken a lot of flack from their colleagues for even daring to investigate this area. That's why they've had no funding. They've had to fund themselves all the way along.
That is so crazy, because this is not a controversial thing in my mind.
Should not be.
It should not be. This is not an airy-fairy thing. We're not talking about psychics. We're not talking about UFOs. We're talking about something we know exists.
Yeah.
So to bury your head in the sand over something like this seems to me
vested in
preposterous.
Vested interest. Right now, NASA is spending the equivalent of one attack helicopter a year on investigating the comet and asteroid danger. $50 million a year.
Not that much.
It's peanuts. It's a minuscule sum. Hundreds of billions of dollars on massive, sophisticated military equipment, which we can use to slaughter one another in ever more sophisticated ways. But just $50 million a year on saving the Earth from a potential cataclysm that could put our civilization back into the Stone Age tomorrow.
And I don't mean to keep harping on Michael Shermer, because I like Michael, but that he highlights this sort of natural inclination to poke fun at something that he has done no research on whatsoever. When I pointed out Gobekli Tepe and I sent him some articles from National Geographic, he went radio silent. I mean,
he should know about it. It's astonishing the number of people who
mocking it.
Yeah,
if you're going to mock it, you should actually know what you're mocking.
Yeah. And to say that Gobekli Tepe was created by hunter-gatherers, well, I'm sorry, that's just a theory. That's not a fact. I mean, you have a sophisticated site with astronomical alignments, with hundreds and hundreds of megalithic pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, the world's first perfectly aligned north-south building, which you can only do with astronomy. It's not enough to say, oh, they were just hunter-gatherers. There was something extraordinary.
From a half a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some serious sophistication. I mean, how big were these stones?
Well, the biggest one actually is still in the quarry. They left it because it had a fault in it. They clearly intended to move it. 50 tons. You're looking at 20-foot high objects, and then it's the putting together of them. See, here's the problem. Hunter-gatherer societies are not the kinds of societies that produce large-scale fixed monuments. Why? Because they don't generate a surplus. You can't pay for somebody to become an architect and for of those times, somebody to become an astronomer. You're busy hunting and gathering, and that's what you do. Agriculture generates a surplus, and that is the problem at Gobekli Tepe, because there is no background. This site just appears out of nowhere amidst what appears to be a hunter-gatherer community, but what they're not considering is the possibility we're looking at a technology transfer, that the survivors of a lost civilization who already had all that knowledge came to Gobekli Tepe and used that site as a center of initiation to teach the local hunter-gatherers how to do agriculture. And that's now taken as the beginnings of civilization. I would say it is the reinvention or the remaking of civilization.
So when we're looking back at Sumer and any artifacts we find in ancient Mesopotamia in that area, Iraq, those are the people that are sort of reinventing and relearning.
Well, actually, when we talk of Mesopotamia, which means between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Gobekli Tepe is sitting right there in the headwaters between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we cannot separate that from the later cultures that enter history 5,000, 6,000 years ago. They're part of the lineage that descended from Gobekli Tepe times. And what's fascinating about Gobekli Tepe is the way it doesn't fit, the way there's no background to it, that you would expect to see them practicing, learning architectural skills. The oldest stuff should be the worst. And as they carry on, it gets better. That site ran for 1,000 years. The best stuff is the oldest. 1,000 years later, what they were producing wasn't so good. This is a real anomaly, and it needs to be investigated, not mocked by skeptics, but actually explored to consider maybe this does rock the whole paradigm.
And it's kind of ironic that in their desire to get away from the ancient myths and tales in the Bible, they've ignored those ancient myths and tales, which all talk about cataclysms